the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, a set of Victorian artists who were fed up with painting pure, virginal, Madonna-like women. These bad boys shook up the art world by painting women in all their complex glory. Millais' painting Ophelia was the Brotherhood's big break. After years of mockery from the British Royal Academy, who was pretty much the authority in art in Britain at the time, this painting of Hamlet's doomed fiancée caused the art establishment to stand up and take the brothers seriously. They weren't actually brothers. They were united by a desire to make it in the art world on their own terms. They considered the Renaissance painting traditions tired, boring, and played out, and they had something new in mind. The key players were John Everett Millais, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, John William Waterhouse, William Holman Hunt, and their critic and patron, John Ruskin. The Brotherhood did involve some women. The model for Ophelia was Elizabeth Siddal, who actually caught hypothermia and almost died while posing for this painting. Lizzie Siddal joined other women like Effie Gray, Annie Miller, and Jane Morris in bringing the Pre-Raphaelite vision of women to life. These women were dark, thoughtful, and far cries from the delicate porcelain women of Raphael. For so you see, the Pre-Raphaelite movement actually comes after Raphael. Raffaele Sanzio di Urbino was one of the most prominent artists of the Italian Renaissance. You're probably familiar with his cherubs or his Madonna. The Renaissance sought to drag people out of the Dark Ages and towards light and hope, usually in the form of stories from the Bible or Greek mythology. But by the mid-1800s, people had maybe forgotten about the uglier, darker aspects of the Middle Ages. Folks like the Pre-Raphaelites were waxing nostalgic about the medieval times, a time they perceived as more in touch with wilderness, wildness, and the natural world. So, Millais chose an Elizabethan heroine for his painting, Ophelia, the doomed fiancée of Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Ophelia drowns after being gaslit, lied to, and messed with for just about an entire play. The Virgin Mary would never have to deal with that crap. The Pre-Raphaelites depicted other complex female characters like Circe, Lilith, Persephone, and the Lady of Shalott. They also drew women who weren't characters at all, just everyday women. They even depicted Mary, mother of Jesus, as just a regular mom. This concept was radical for the Victorians, who'd made a culture out of placing women on a pedestal as paragons of purity and domesticity. The only acceptable type of goddess back then was a domestic one. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood shook the art world even further by making modeling somewhat of a respected profession. Up until that point, because models usually posed nude, modeling was just a few notches above prostitution in British society. But the Pre-Raphaelite models were scouted from everyday life, and they became famous, even sometimes artists in their own right. When Siddal modeled for Ophelia, she was the toast of the town, even though her parents hated the idea and wished she'd just stuck to working in a hat shop until she got married. By showing angry, dirty, and emotional women, the Pre-Raphaelites dared to humanize the feminine, to show the world they were just as capable and complex as men. The movement dovetailed exactly with the women's suffrage movement. The National Society for Women's Suffrage formed in England in 1872, the same year this painting came out. The Pre-Raphaelites are proof that art can change the world. Let's look at 3 examples of their daring genius. The magic circle depicts a woman, not necessarily a witch, casting a spell. We know she's casting a spell because she has a cauldron, a talisman, and a long stick, which she is using to draw the magic circle in question. Her hair is wild and braided, and her bare feet on the earth symbolize a connection to nature. The bold, wild brush strokes also convey wild magic, like the painting is casting its own spell. The crescent-shaped sickle is a symbol of the moon and of Hecate, the Greek goddess of magic. Critic Anthony Hobson of the Tate Gallery writes, "Outside the circle, the landscape is bare and barren, but within its confines are flowers and the woman herself, objects of beauty." The painting is not a condemnation of witches or witchcraft, but a celebration. or at the very least, an anthropological depiction. The woman in this painting has power, a power derived or maybe even stripped from nature. The use of the word beauty is an interesting one. The Pre-Raphaelite movement aimed to show that women were beautiful even when they weren't perfect. The Pre-Raphaelite movement's most colorful brother was by far Dante Gabriel Rossetti. The whole brotherhood was basically his idea. Rossetti wrote poems and taught art classes and made sketches, but he was actually something of a late bloomer as far as painters go. Rossetti placed the utmost importance on finding the right muse. This muse came to him in the form of Jane Morris, who was married to William Morris, who founded the arts and crafts movement. Morris was Rossetti's companion and also one of his students. Rossetti made several portraits of Jane, but this is one of the most literal. In Proserpina, which is the Roman name for Persephone, Rossetti juxtaposes the plight of Persephone onto his lover Jane herself. Persephone was dragged to the underworld to live with Hades, although she loved another on the surface. Jane Morris was dragged between William Morris, her legal husband and the father of her children, and Rossetti, with whom she shared an electric artistic passion. Rossetti was sensitive to her plight and created this painting and the accompanying sonnet to empathize with her. The sonnet goes like this. Afar away the light that brings cold cheer, unto this wall, one instant and no more, admitted at my distant palace door. Afar the flowers of Enna from this drear, dire fruit which tasted once must thrall me here. Afar those skies from this Tartarian gray, that chills me, and afar, how far away. The nights that shall become the days that were, afar from mine own self I seem and wing, strange ways in thought and listen for a sign, and still some heart unto some soul doth pine, whose sounds mine inner sense in fain to bring, continually together murmuring, woe me for thee, unhappy Proserpine. Rossetti was a real glutton for punishment. Rossetti was also married to someone else, Lizzie Siddal, the model for Ophelia. It is said that Rossetti's chaotic love drove Miss Siddal to madness, or at least to a laudanum addiction. Proserpine exists in two versions, one with dark hair, like Jane's, and one with red hair, like Elizabeth's. The Awakening Conscience by William Holman Hunt shows a woman rising from a man's lap in an alcove cluttered by the trappings of culture. Sheet music, books, a piano, and beautiful Art Nouveau wallpaper. Although I like the wallpaper, at the time it would have been considered quite tacky. Art critic Elizabeth Prettejohn notes the interior's nouveau riche vulgarity because the wood is highly polished, there is gold gilt, and there are so many patterns, and the room is hopelessly cluttered. Hunt was one of the more religiously inclined of the Brotherhood, but this painting is said to be inspired by his relationship with Annie Miller. Annie Miller met Hunt while she was working as a prostitute, but she became a society lady after years of modeling. This painting takes place in the bought boudoir of a kept woman, also known as a fallen woman to Dickinsonian subscribers. In the Victorian era, it was not uncommon for gentlemen of means to find a girl in the gutter, fix her up, buy her manners, put her in a nice apartment, and pray she mend the error of her ways. These men considered this work a type of mission. John Ruskin saw tragedy in this painting. He wrote, "The very hem of the poor girl's dress has a story in it. If we think how soon its pure whiteness may be soiled with dust and rain, her outcast feet falling in the street." But I think the real tragedy here is for the man. This woman's happiness lies not with her lover. She rises from the confines of his lap, entranced by knowledge, music, and the mysteries of life. This chop-stashed chucklehead could never be enough for her, and his feeble arms around her legs tell us this gazelle has already gone. Interestingly enough, the painting we see today is not how the painting was originally displayed. The expression on the girl's face was once one of such pain and horror that the painting's commissioner, Thomas Fairbairn, insisted that Hunt change it. In any case, the awakening conscience suggests that women have a conscience to be awakened. The term conscience could also apply to the foolish man who knows not what he's done. There are so many other luscious, wonderful examples of Pre-Raphaelite art. Many of them portray women as interesting, sexual beings. Painters were not merely projecting femininity onto a female form, they were attempting to understand it. Victorian society was hilariously sexist, so all of these paintings are by men. But they formed a lexicon of feminine imagery and have become part of women's understandings of themselves. It's no wonder Taylor Swift chose the Pre-Raphaelite tradition for her music video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a lot and were inspired and entertained. If you enjoyed this video any little bit, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell me your favorite Pre-Raphaelite painting, even if it's just one of the ones displayed here. And thanks for dropping by. Take care, everybody. Cheers.